Go.
Ah,
Well, welcome, everyone. Today we have Steve Anderson. He's here to discuss his latest album, Journeyman's Progress. Thank you, Steve, for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk with us.
no, thank you very much.
We're going to be talking about his debut solo album, but also he has been playing guitar for quite some time. He is also a founding member of the melodic rock band The Room, and also a longtime member of the progressive rock band Grey Lady Down, and a jazz rock fusionist with Sphere, if I'm correct. But go ahead and just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your past and where you're at now.
Gosh, okay. Well, thank you, Mark. Um, yeah, where do I start? How far back do you want to go?
It's up to you. Yeah, it's up to you. That's easy.
Um, well, I mean, I I suppose basically I really only got into music kind of properly, I suppose, pretty much about the time I left school. So just starting college and things like that. And that's when I got into music really, I suppose, in general, but then also started learning to play and things like that. So I mean, I'd not had prior to that, I'd had nothing, going through school and things like that. So a little bit, I suppose, coming later to it than a lot of people, but then I'd never had the opportunity to learn any instruments or anything prior to that. Just never really sort of came up, I suppose, particularly. But then the sort of late teenage sort of thing, getting into, I don't know, just starting to discover all this stuff out there and then wanting to learn how to play some of it. So I suppose my kind of earliest influences in that sense were sort of the new wave of British heavy metal, kind of Maiden and Saxon and things like that. But then that kind of drifted more into, I suppose, the slightly weirder stuff. um
What do you mean? Because everyone,
well, I mean,
no,
ultimately, I
no,
mean, just
I'm
just
just joking because everyone has sort of a feeling for weird. Um, and I mentioned who I think is weird because it probably bother people, um, now I've grown to like all of them. But what would you consider?
yeah. Well, I mean, I suppose it when growing up, I'd been exposed to stuff um like the soundtrack for the War of the Worlds
Oh yeah,
and things like that when I was much younger, which had a huge impact on me at the time, and I still absolutely love.
now are you talking about the original one, or
Yes,
I
yeah, yeah.
also, um, if I'm not, I might be mistaken, but I think now I can't remember his name. The lead singer of the Moody Blues. I think they did or at least he sang on
Well,
a.
he was involved, yes.
So that
Yeah,
it was
I'm
that
I'm
one.
terrible with names as well, but
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. He's one of my favorite singers too, and it's like,
Yeah,
come on, you gotta remember. But yeah, um, yeah,
but yeah,
yeah. I
and then stuff like Mike Oldfield and Jean-Michel Jarre and Wendy Carlos and things like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So Clockwork Orange and stuff like that was I mean, I can see now how much of an impact that had on how I think about
Justin
stuff.
Hayward. Justin
Yes,
Hayward.
that's the one.
It
That's the one.
finally
Yeah.
came back to me. Yeah, I would not leave this thing without
Yeah.
remembering his name. Like I said,
Yeah.
he's right up there with Peter Gabriel and some of
Mm,
my favorites. Yeah,
yeah.
his voice is just one of a
So,
kind. Yeah,
the kind of, the quite kind of sort of dramatic stuff like that. That was just a bit, is just a bit more interesting. It wasn't, I never really went through a kind of pop phase or anything like that early on. I was aware of stuff going on, but it didn't really, nothing really resonated until, as I say, until kind of late teens or anything. Um, but as I say, I can really understand now how much um stuff like that has affected why I do the kind of things that I do.
definitely.
Um,
Well, tell us a little bit about your background with the Room and Gray Lady Down.
yeah, well, um, it all came about, I suppose. I mean, the my if you like, first proper band was actually Sphere.
Oh, okay.
And that was with Neil Durant, who's now in IQ, or has been for quite a while. But we basically set that up initially and started working together. Um, at one point, he then depped with GLD for a show at the Marquee Club. And that's how I kind of then got to know the rest of GLD. And then a few years down the line, then they asked me to help out and go and do some shows with them, which coincidentally happened to be over across the pond in the States. So we did some shows with the band called Tristan Park,
Oh yeah,
who
I've heard of them. I
yeah is Brian Coombs, who's now doing the Rocking Horse music studio or whatever it is, music club. Um, but yeah, so I had a fantastic 10 days up and down the East Coast doing a number of shows with GLD, and that then sort of halfway through that, I kind of turned around to them and said, "Look, let's carry on. Sign me up if you want, if you want me." And so then did the next GLD album with them, and is a touring shows with them up until the point at which my tinnitus started to really become an issue
mm,
for me.
that is tough.
I
Yeah.
mean, it became quite terrifying. Isn't quite the right word, but I was, it really kind of stopped me in my tracks and made me think, can I carry on doing this much longer? Um, it was kind of very concerning early on. So I kind of just sort of backed off of everything live, going, I mean, even going out to gigs or anything, I just stopped completely, because I just needed to see see how it, you know, what was happening, and if it was gonna, the level of it was gonna come down and things like that. So I had a few years kind of pause on pretty much everything musically at that point, just I didn't know if I was going to be able to sort of, go back to doing it in the same way. But um then
How did you bring it under control? Because you're obviously
um
touring.
well, I mean, it's not necessarily anything that I did other than just becoming very careful about it. um and I mean, even now, obviously, ever since I've I I can't do gigs without earplugs and things like that in. I mean, I can't even go to gigs and stuff, without, because it just, the kind of background level just goes up if I'm not careful. um it's one of those things. You've got to kind of live with it and hope that it doesn't get any worse and things like that. There's not really anything you can do to fix it as such. Not yet anyway. I mean, fingers crossed one day, but
They keep working on stuff. Yeah.
yeah, it's but because some of it is, yes, there's obviously there's um a certain level of physical damage, but it's also kind of neurological and things as well. So there's it's not something that is ever going to be easy to deal with, I don't think.
Mhm.
So I've just had to be, much more careful about things over the last little while.
Tell us a little
But
bit about the room. Anne sent me some music. I listened to it briefly, but tell us a little bit about that band.
yeah, well, that was that. I mean, the room came about because of Martin Wilson, singer in GLD. He then wanted to start up something new that was a little bit less prog,
Yeah.
but more focused on melodies and big choruses and
Mhm.
a bit more um tune based, actual, rather than 10-minute instrumental noodling. um and yeah, I'd always felt that that was something that I would be. It's one of those things, I guess. uh it was a particular kind of interest that I had in wanting to explore, as
Mhm.
well as all the weird, you know, Zappa-esque, Crimson-esque kind
Yeah.
of strange jazz oddness. But you know, as I say, the one of the things I've always been much more interested in melodies than, you know, um extreme shredding and noodling and 60 million notes a second and type stuff.
Sure.
um so I've I guess, so I've always preferred, um kind of the solos of people like Steve Rothery, um as
Yeah, he's
opposed
great.
to,
Brilliant. Yeah.
yeah, as opposed to the more technical kind of things. It's not, it's not that I don't like it, it's just trying to capture those, really beautiful melodic kind of phrases and things, and try and build them into the songs. Oh, sorry.
Well, speaking of solos, your
Yeah.
Journeyman's
Oh.
Progress, your solo first solo album, I think it's your first solo album,
Mm.
um, has a beautiful solo guitar uh, solo, the name of the song that opens the album. Tell us a little bit about the development of that song and what inspired it, and
You mean Coda,
or Coda, I'm sorry.
or
Oh,
the
okay.
sorry, or do you mean the little acoustic bit at the beginning?
Yeah, I think that's Solus, if I remember.
Solus, sorry, yes. Um, well, that came about um, around the time that we tried to get GLD back up and running again. And so we were writing stuff for that as a six piece with Julian, the original guitarist, as well. So we were starting to get very crazy with, as I say, some very very Crimson-esque type stuff
Mhm.
going on. Lots of interlocking guitar things and stuff like that. Um, but that little acoustic thing actually came about because of me wanting to write something in a similar vein, weirdly, to how a particular Opeth album starts,
Oh,
Heritage,
yeah.
and it has a beautiful little piano thing, very gentle, delicate, lovely little piano before it kicks in with a big classic Opethy type thing. And I just thought I kind of wanted to do something similar, um, but obviously just with a you know acoustic guitar, and that came out. So
And then you followed it up with a big uh, full great guitar and keyboards,
yeah,
which is Coda. So tell us about
so,
that. Because that's a real uh, album starter for sure.
mm, yeah. It once I'd got to the point where I had a handful of pieces that I knew were going to be part of this thing. Obviously I was then starting to think, oh, okay, well, which one, what do I start with, and where do I fit these things together and stuff like that. And I for a long time I'd been planning on using one of the later tracks, the very ambient kind of thing, as an intro. But then I thought, well, that's kind of 3 or 4 minutes of very very ambient kind of stuff, which will probably put a lot of people off. So I probably need something a little bit more up front
Mm-hmm.
to get people to listen a bit further.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, so I needed something, one of them to be, that was a little bit more um uh sort of rocky and loud, in order to, you know, as I say, hopefully make people listen a little bit further, rather than immediately putting too many people off with just weird, you know, very very abstract ambient kind of stuff. Um, so yeah, so Coda ended up, you know, being pretty much right at the top. Um, the the original the original drum and guitar riff came from a studio session, where in with the room, actually, it was going to be part of the second album, because that was the studio session that it just came out of. We were just kind of jamming around, and just started working just on, as I say, that basic kind of riff. And I mean, ultimately, we didn't use it on the album, so it just kind of sat there for a while. And I'd kind of sketched out this solo for it, and then just kind of came back to it and thought, oh, okay, yeah, no, that's, I really like the riff, and
Mm-hmm.
that's got something, and just kind of started to try and develop it and work on it a bit further. So weirdly, the the uh the riff and everything was there, and the solo was there, and so I actually ended up writing all of the keyboard parts to the solo.
Oh wow.
um so because there was, there wasn't anything. It was literally just the basic rhythm guitar riff and the drums, that was all I had as a starting point.
Mhm.
And then just kind of chopped it around and constructed it from the bits and pieces of studio recording that I had. And then yeah, as I say, then kind of built everything up around it to sort of put it all together. So oh yeah, very annoying. Ah,
No, that's okay. Yeah, he's getting over a cold. He mentioned that before we began, so he's
yeah. No, sorry, it's just yeah, just making my throat very tickly. But
no, that's all right. Yeah, if you need a drink of
probably
water,
helped.
go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm good. Thank you.
All right,
Um,
and then how about a glimpse of light? That's beautiful instrumental.
hmm, thank you. It's that. I mean, quite a few pieces on this have all come from kind of purely, very, very, abstract, improvised ideas.
Mhm.
Um, and that was one of them from a group of ideas and things that had come out of a day, basically sat at home, very, very focused on trying to just generate new ideas. So not spending very long on anything, just coming up with something, getting it down with the idea of then being able to go back to it and pick out anything that was particularly interesting and develop it. And that was definitely one of those pieces. So I would literally set things recording, play something for a minute or so, and then go back and play along with it to build up layers of let's say purely kind of improvised sort of stuff. And then and then think, oh, okay, yeah, well, that little bit, that little block there is quite nice, so I can use that and I can repeat it and then add some other bits and then use one of the other little sections and slowly kind of compose something out of chunks of improvised noodlings.
Was and I hope I say this right. Was Helibor written about the plant, or what was what's the story behind that one? Yeah,
um
maybe I'm
well,
saying
again,
it wrong.
that was very similar. That one is in a different tuning to normal, and it's actually in because I've got my Ovation acoustic. That one is actually in Robert Fripp's new standard tuning, um, which is basically in fifths, so it's much more like violins and cellos and things, tuning wise. But yeah, again, that was all very kind of coming up with the basic kind of underlying part and then adding a little improvised melody over the top. But
Where was the title?
originally,
Where was the title inspired from? What was it?
well, the working title I had originally for that was an English Rose.
Oh, okay.
Um, but then I played it to my brother at one point, and he immediately turned around and said, "Oh, that sounds quite Christmassy." And
Mhm.
so I thought,
Yeah,
"Oh, yeah, okay, I
perfect
guess it
timing.
does." Yeah. And so so hence hellebores are also sometimes called Christmas roses. So I thought, well, okay, how can I tie it give it a kind of Christmassy slant, but without using an obvious kind of Christmas title, because obviously the trouble with that is then it kind of locks it
into that
you
season.
know
Yeah.
that season, which I didn't want to be overt in that sense. So it's a nod to that kind of connection
Hmm.
because of the type of sound without being obvious about it.
How about Circlet? That was
Circlet. Well,
blended the
that
guitars. Yeah.
yeah. So again, that's another very improvised kind of thing. So I'd started playing one part and then go back and just play along with it and play along with it and things like that. The the kind of the intention, I suppose, behind that one, or rather more what it ended up sounding like. Um, I was back. Oh, where was it? It's probably about 2001, I think now. Or it could have been 99. I can't remember. I went to Italy to do a guitarcraft course with Robert Fripp, um, which was something I'd been, kind of curious about for quite a while, and this kind of happened to come up, so I went over to it was held in a training college for monks
Oh wow.
in a tiny little town in Italy. And it was it's very intense, very focused, unlike anything else I've probably done or will do. um but one of the things about guitarcraft is you have all these people together, um and you all sit in a circle, and there are a whole load of exercises and things that they introduce you to, about performing as part of a circle. And it doesn't matter if it's 5 people or 50 people, but the kind of the sound that happens when you have all these people together, um and a lot of it is to do about playing a note and passing it to the next person who's sat
Oh wow.
next to you. And so each person plays a note round this circle.
Okay, cool.
It's phenomenal. It's fantastic because obviously then that's one thing, but then you have another note on the other side that starts, and so you've got two notes going round, and then you've got three notes going
And
round,
it's
and then
all improvised, or do
yeah,
you
oh yeah,
write the
yeah. So
song?
yes, absolutely. It's all about um this
Training.
this
Yeah.
this focus about constant being aware of where you are and what you're doing, and this transition of notes from one person to the next and
Very cool.
things like that. And so I'd inadvertently almost ended up doing something similar with this piece,
Hmm.
but obviously just on my own. So it's not a circle. It's a baby circle. It's a circlet. So
Yeah, very good. Now, Mr. Mikado is my favorite, and I
Mm,
hear some of the Watch. I don't know if you know the band from Italy, the Watch.
yes.
They do a lot of Genesis covers and
Mm,
things like that. And well, my favorite progressive rock is early Genesis,
right.
Gabriel era Genesis, and
Yeah.
I heard a lot of that, but which I liked. But tell us about that one. It
Mm.
fascinating
Um,
song. Yeah.
Well, this one that was originally written as a piece for Sphere, which may happen at some point in the future. We have actually played it once.
Hmm.
Um, we did a show in Belgium
Oh,
at the Spirit 66,
yeah,
which is a
very
fabulous,
cool.
fabulous venue. I love it. I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite places to play. The it's a fairly small kind of underground
Yeah,
venue, but the sound quality is just phenomenal,
yeah.
absolutely phenomenal. Um, and so, as I say, we did actually perform it once there, um, a fair few years ago, uh, but it was, as I say, so it's a piece that I'd written specifically for them. Um, but I then also started having I'd spent a long time trying to edit it together, and I'd I'd come up with all these percussion elements and all these samples of me hitting bits of metal and tools and drills and saws and all sorts of crazy stuff like that. So there was all this kind of other textural stuff going on with it. And so I kind of had to go back to it and revisit it and kind of pull it into some kind of shape that had all this stuff in it that I felt that it needed. Um, and I very kind, I asked the other guys if they were cool with me doing this with that piece, and they were, you know, they very graciously said, yeah, of course, go for it.
Um,
um and yeah, so it was the kind of final piece in the jigsaw, if you like. It was the last one that I finished
hmm.
for all of this. um and yes, interestingly, I sent everything else over to Andy Tillison, from the Tangent, because he mixed everything.
I was
And so
gonna
we'd
ask
heard.
you, how what was it like working with him? He's
Oh, that was fab. That was we had so much fun. um I'd known about him for years
sure.
because we'd done a GLD show um with him and Parallel of 90 Degrees years and years ago. So I kind of knew about him. And I'd been struggling with mixing all of this stuff because the more that I tried to do to it, the worse it got.
Hmm.
So everything was just starting to get all squished and muddy and everything because I was just trying to force it too hard. And so I kind of finally accepted to myself that I needed another pair of ears to look at all this stuff and go, right, no, you need to do this to it, and it needs, and coincidentally, I just happened to have seen a post by Andy explaining that's what he did. He has his own studio. He's done engineering and mixing and everything for decades.
Yeah.
Um, and that was just a, real kind
Light
of light
bulb.
bulb thing
Yeah.
that, I'd finally come to the conclusion that I needed somebody